One of the biggest Oregon USC games ever this Saturday, and if the Ducks play well, Oregon fans will have a good time.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, part of the number one sports podcast network out there. Thank you all so much for helping make that the case. Rankings reaction as we got the latest update for the College Football Playoff Committee. Thoughts with that. The chess match between coaching staffs in this game. That is all coming up on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Download the FanDuel app today. So there have been a lot of big games for Oregon against USC. 2023 was pretty big because Oregon already had a loss, kind of like right now. They were at home late in the year. I think there are a lot of similar vibes with that. I think Oregon's better now than they were then. I think USC has improved more from that game as a program than Oregon has because they were, of course, at a higher level at that time. But the unfortunate instance in 2011, we don't need to talk about. 2009 is going to come up again later in the segment. But USC can provide a very real challenge to the Ducks. Oregon, according to our friends at FanDuel, is favored by 9.5 points. And that line has gone up from where it opened at 8.5. And the reason behind that is that if Oregon plays in a way that doesn't let USC get an advantage they don't already have, like if you don't make a big mistake or shoot yourself in the foot, I absolutely think Oregon can win and cover that spread. Now, do I think it's going to be that easy? I don't have that suspicion because I do think USC is a good team. Showed something last week against Iowa with the way they won a game in the rain, much like the Ducks did when they went to Iowa City a couple of weeks ago. But for Oregon in this spot, the USC defense is absolutely improved. Against the run, they have shown real progress, and they have won games this year as a result that I don't think they would have won last year because they were the same sort of games stylistically. Still, the USC run defense has been far from perfect. They have given up 150 or more yards on the ground to 3 of their last 4 opponents. And we have seen this Oregon run game probably be the best version of itself. 2022 statistically would be the other comparison for the Ducks. But we have seen this Oregon run game be as good, if not better, than any year Dan Lanning has been at the helm. And that's because the offensive line is playing incredibly well, and the trio of running backs are just all really good, keeping each other fresh. So the game that gives me optimism in this one for the Ducks is USC when they matched up earlier this year against Notre Dame. Notre Dame in that one went for 306 yards and 3 touchdowns. I believe Jeremiah Love had about 400 yards on the ground. Not actually. I mean, it was no Kenyon Barner 2012 in Los Angeles, but it was a heck of a performance. This USC run defense is better, but their pass defense has been stronger, and they're dealing with injuries just like Oregon is on the offensive side. They had some guys like Kamari Ramsey get dinged up last week as well. I don't know what their availability is going to be going into this game as I record this show. But this USC team, generally speaking, has gotten better since the last time Oregon played them. That game in 2023 in Eugene, 36-27 final. USC went into that game at 7-3. Of course, they come into this one with 2 losses, not 3, and Oregon went into that game at 8-1. They come into this one at 9-1. So the records wise and the time of year, it feels similar, but the biggest thing that has improved with USC is their ability to run the football. The Trojans this year have made a concerted effort to be better on the ground and be better defending the run. And I think that's been both a personnel and schematic approach. And in the last several games, we've seen that play out sometimes. Last week against Iowa, they only went for 106 yards on the ground. They threw for 254 with Jaden Maiava, who was the quarterback, kid you not, backing up or starting, and there was a back and forth at UNLV. And then he transferred to USC after starting there and then got replaced, of course, and UNLV had success. But Maiava went to USC last year to back up Miller Moss. and then he got the starting job at the end of the year, and Jade Maiava has played really well. But it's not the quarterback that I ever have serious questions about with a Lincoln Riley offense. He's been very established in the sport and continues to be a good offensive play caller. It's the run game. So last year, USC did not have as much success on the ground, really in any year since Lincoln Riley got there. But one thing that I'll talk about later is the linebackers for Oregon have been up and down. I think they're trending up right now. They will get challenged in the ground game in this one against the Trojans, who have gone over 200 yards on the ground 5 times this year, and they went for 173 against Northwestern, who we know has a pretty good defense. So I think this Trojans team is not exactly the stereotype of what Lincoln Riley's teams have been, because the first year it was all about Caleb Williams, and the defense wasn't any good, and then Caleb Williams kind of took a step back, but was still talented, but the defense wasn't able to support him, and it was kind of just Caleb Williams. This USC offense is not that. If Oregon is not able to take away the run game, I think USC will absolutely lean into it with whoever they have back there. They've had some injuries in the running back room. It hasn't mattered a whole heck of a lot. So I think that this is a USC team that can absolutely go to Autzen Stadium and beat Oregon. They have struggled on the road this year. Both of their losses have come away from home. The Notre Dame game was won. And by the way, as I'm recording the show, weather forecast looks like it will be clear on Saturday. And the other time they lost was on the road at Illinois, who's a good team. And Luke Allmeyer went for 364 yards on this USC defense. They've gotten much better through the air. Sorry, not 364. He went for 331. They have not allowed a quarterback to go for 215 yards in the games since then. Those matchups were against Michigan, true freshman Bryce Underwood, Notre Dame in the rain, Nebraska, Dylan Raiola got hurt, Preston Stone at Northwestern, Mark Gronowski at Iowa. Still, that unit has played better, but I think the ground game is going to be pivotal. And you think back to some of the all-time Oregon-USC matchups, my personal favorite was 2009, the paradigm shifter in the Pac-10, double RIP. 47-20, Oregon went for 391 and 4 touchdowns. I don't think you're doing that on this USC defense, but it would not surprise me in the slightest if you look up at the end of the game and the Ducks have been able to run for 230, 240. I think that's a great number to try to strive for. It's right about where their season average is. If Oregon hits that mark, I think Oregon will have a lot of success in this game. But that 2009 game, boy, that was something. And as chance would have it, I've got an SSA about that. If Oregon plays its best, what are the chances it's a repeat of the 2009 blackout? Man, 391. 390 would be 85 yards more than USC has allowed in a game on the ground this season. And that's a lot. So final score of that was 47-20. If we're not going for an identical statistical carryover, Jeremiah Masoli in that game was 19-31 for 222 yards and a touchdown. I could see a similar sort of stat line, maybe a little bit more efficient for Dante Moore on Saturday afternoon. But if Oregon runs for more yards than it passes for, I think generally speaking that's a good sign with the way that this ground game can create explosives. Whereas last year, I wouldn't have said that because they weren't as explosive and the run game couldn't carry the offense the way that it's been able to this season. So I think that if Oregon plays to its full potential, yes, I think they'll win and cover. So give me, let's see, a repeat of like 47-20. I don't know about that. I think USC is a little bit. So I'll give that one. I'll give that one a 4. Like it wouldn't be the craziest thing that I've seen, but I think if Oregon plays to its potential, and even if USC plays well, the Ducks are the better team. I think it would be in like the 30, 34, 27, 38, like mid to high 30s to high 20s sort of range. I think that's kind of what you're going for there. If, I'll talk about this more on tomorrow's show, they force turnovers of Jaden Maiava, then I think Oregon could really start to open things up. But I don't expect Oregon to win the game 47-20. I think it'll be closer and harder to win than that. But yeah, if the Ducks play well, I think Saturday could be really, really fun for a lot of reasons. First, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all that good stuff. But what does it mean for the playoff based on what the committee just said? And Oregon's got a new 2026 recruit, and you can't overlook that impact in this game. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So this line has moved out to Oregon minus 9.5. And Oregon has lost as a favorite of that size or bigger during the Dan Lanning era. So don't think that's a guarantee the Ducks win. However, as I mentioned, if the Ducks play well, yeah, I think they will win and cover that number. Might be tight, but still, the Ducks are capable of doing it. If you believe wholeheartedly Oregon's winning by 10 or more points, you want to get on it before it jumps to 10.5, because then you might be in dicey territory. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, I've got my second segment sip, and we are ready to roll. So Oregon comes in up one spot from a week ago in the latest playoff rankings from the committee. They are at number 7. They're behind Ole Miss at 6, Texas Tech at 5, Georgia 4, Texas A&M 3, Indiana 2, and Ohio State at number 1. I am pleasantly surprised that this was the outcome. I was fully prepared mentally for Oregon to be behind a 2-loss Oklahoma team, which would have looked strange to be sure. It's just that Oklahoma pulled off a victory over the weekend that is better than a victory that Oregon has. And what the committee has been telling all of us in the college football world for the last couple of weeks with their rankings, I think more than the other side of this conversation, they're wanting to reward wins more than they are wanting to punish losses. It's why Tulane is the group of 5 representative right now in the top 25. They have a couple of Power 4 wins, and they beat Memphis, who's a top G5 team. That is outweighing their loss to UTSA on the road, and the Ole Miss one just kind of gets disregarded, but that's outweighing their loss to UTSA on the road, which was really bad because they lost in pretty big fashion. But you look at Alabama, who has 2 losses. They have a bunch of good wins, but one of their losses is good, not great because it was at home, but a good loss for whatever that's worth to Oklahoma. And then you have a horrible loss, and they're just not really getting punished in a severe way. They're being more rewarded for their wins. So bringing this back to Oregon, yes, winning the next 2 games ensures Oregon is in the college football playoff. I think it all but ensures they'd get a home playoff game because that'll be for the teams that are seeded 5 through 8 in the committee's final rankings. And I don't see Oklahoma that plays LSU and Missouri, who are both, Missouri's actually back in the top 25 this week. They're a fringe team in that regard. LSU is got a talented roster, but an interim head coach, and is kind of the equivalent of Penn State at the moment, where it's like, their potential's there, but what exactly is the coaching situation, and their concerns are with who's going to be their next head coach. But Oregon sitting there at 9-1 tells me that 11-1, I don't think anyone would leap past them. Notre Dame doesn't have an opponent that could put them over the top. BYU could, but I think if the Cougars were to rematch with Texas Tech, who's ahead of Oregon right now, in the Big 12 championship game, win that and go ahead of the Ducks, I think Texas Tech would fall behind Oregon in that scenario because initially the committee liked the Big 12, but with these rankings, I don't know if the committee's liking the Big 12 quite as much because BYU beat Utah and is just 1 spot ahead of the Utes. And if the playoff ended today because of auto bids from the group of 5 and ACC champions, BYU and Utah would both be out. Now, there's a lot of football still to be played on that regard, but BYU is 1 slot ahead of Utah. Notre Dame is 4 slots ahead of Miami, who Miami beat. Miami, I didn't phrase that very well. Let me start over, okay? Do over. Take 2. BYU beat Utah and has a better record. They are 1 slot ahead of the Utes. Notre Dame lost to Miami. They have the same record, and Notre Dame is 4 slots ahead of the Hurricanes. Now, I don't believe that Notre Dame is going to be able to climb past Oregon because they don't have a high-level opponent remaining on their schedule. And I don't think that maybe Oklahoma could, but bottom line is if Oregon wins out, they will have a home playoff game, which is great. That has been my goal from the moment this season began. If they beat USC and beat Washington, obviously, first and foremost, it'll be great to win those rivalry matchups because I think that's something that we all value a whole heck of a lot, watching and following Oregon football for a long time. But the playoff implications come down to, will Oregon get a home playoff game? And if they were to drop one, especially USC, I think there's a greater urgency and it's a better outcome if Oregon, if they're going to go 10-2, again, that's an if, because I think they're going to win the next 2 games. Let's say they don't. It is better to beat USC and lose to Washington because the committee is looking for those quality wins, and USC is ranked number 15. If they were to lose to Oregon on the road, I think they'd still be ranked inside the top 20. So having that top 20 win, I think would help you more for what this committee's told us so far than a loss at Washington in a rivalry game would hurt the Ducks and their resume. But the other thing that is manifesting itself, and I talked about this in the second segment of Locked On College Football today more extensively, so if you want to hear more thoughts, you can go check that out. But I will briefly summarize here. Right now, these things tend to work themselves out, but 1 year maybe they don't. There is setting up to be a potential massive, I mean ginormous logjam of 10-2 teams. That is on the table. Maybe chaos ensues. There are a couple head-to-heads I think that will require that it's not the case, especially when you get to conference championship games. But you could have, let's say Oregon loses to USC. The ramifications on the playoff, again, here's a second reason why it would be worse than losing to Washington but beating USC. Even if emotionally you want to beat Washington more than USC, I know that you guys and myself included want to beat them both. But if USC can then get into the fold as a 10-2 and be another team in there, here are teams that could wind up 10-2 at the end of the season. Oklahoma, who Oregon is currently ranked 1 spot ahead of. And I don't know if the Sooners even, because they're not making the SEC championship game. Now that I think about it, I don't think they would jump Oregon, because if the Ducks were to go at 10-2, they would. So let's say Oregon winds up at 10-2. Oklahoma could go 10-2. Notre Dame could go 10-2. Alabama could be at 10-2. BYU and Utah could both be at 10-2. Miami could be at 10-2 with a win over Notre Dame, which if Oregon doesn't beat USC would be better than any single win currently than what Oregon has on their resume. Michigan could be 10-2 if they were to wind up beating Ohio State. Vanderbilt could be 10-2. I'm not even done. Those are just a handful of the teams that could wind up at 10-2. You could have a logjam like we have not seen before, and I don't know that Oregon would win the resume battle over all of those teams, especially if they lose to USC. But even if they beat USC, lose to Washington, I don't know that they would win that particular matchup. So I don't think this was a bad outcome for Oregon because they're ahead of Oklahoma at least. So they should control their own fate to get a home playoff game and stay ahead of the Sooners and Notre Dame. If they win their next 2 games, of course, they'll be in, and I don't think they could get dropped down to have a road playoff game. Definitely not. But, I definitely, as things have continued to materialize and play out, I feel less confident than I did a week ago or even earlier this week, frankly, that Oregon at 10-2 makes the playoff. That is definitely something to note. So, one of you asked me about the impact both on and off the field in terms of recruiting for this game against USC, which is kind of like sprinkles on top of the cake. It's not the cake or the icing even, but I think it's maybe the sprinkles. In the 2026 class, USC's got 35 commits. Oregon is now up to 19 because they picked one up the other day. They landed Hudson Lewis, 5'10", 175-pound receiver from Boise, Idaho, class 26. 3-star recruit, not a super highly rated guy. He is the number 189 receiver in the country. according to the 24/7 composite. He was committed to Utah, flipped to the Ducks. All I can see when I watch his highlight film is Charles Nelson. He plays both ways. Charles Nelson did that in his day. He's small. He's shifty. I think there is some upside there, to be sure. I don't think I expect him to be a big-time recruit, but certainly he's a guy who can play a factor in the return game as well. I could see him carving out a role on special teams for the Ducks when he gets to campus, but nice, solid pickup for Ross Douglas. Nothing incredible or groundbreaking, not exactly Ja'Cory Moore, but this game, Oregon and USC, the recruiting impact, I think it's measurable. I don't think it's seismic, because these two schools have established themselves brand-wise in such a big way. I think that USC benefits from a win over Oregon on the recruiting trail more than Oregon benefits from a win, because the Ducks' brand of recruiting over the last several years has been stronger than USC's, without question. Now in the 26 cycle, Lincoln Riley and their GM, Chad Bowden, that came from Notre Dame, have suddenly gotten serious about it, and they have the number one class in 24/7's rankings. So I think it's more about thwarting, from a recruiting angle, just on that side of things with this game. I think it's more about thwarting USC's momentum than it is building a lot more, because Oregon still has a top 5 class in the 2026 cycle, and signing day is just over a month away at the end of December. The early signing window, that is. Then the portal will open in early January for a couple of weeks before the national championship, but after all the bowl games and such. So I think there's definitely an impact for sure. I don't think it's groundbreaking one way or the other, and I think it's a bigger opportunity for USC to show something to recruits, because I think Oregon's already had a lot of those moments, whether it's Penn State or heck, even Iowa to a degree. I think they've just had a lot of those games. Ohio State last year, USC's looking for that moment. Oregon's looking for another reason to show people, or another opportunity to show people, hey, what we're doing is working. This is why you should come here. Look at all the guys that we've recruited, retained, and developed over the years. And USC is looking for what would probably be the biggest win in the Lincoln Riley era. So that's how I view the recruiting angle in this one. So much to get to. If you got more thoughts, let me know in the comments below. Shoot me a DM. All that good stuff. The chess match. A lot of interesting elements to the chess match between these two coaching staffs. First, this episode brought to you by Game Time. College football has been back for a while, and we're all excited about that. The tailgates, the rivalries like Oregon has in the next 2 games, the energy in the stands, there's nothing like it. But let's be real, actually getting tickets can feel like more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why you want to use Game Time, just like I do. The app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I've used it to go to the Big Ten Championship, to Oregon's basketball game against Auburn on Monday, where I'll be in Las Vegas, to go to comedy shows. The process has been great. And I've saved money every time. I've compared my tickets because I'm just curious, and I look and go, wow, I am actually saving money on Game Time, and you can as well. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. All right, let's keep diving into this USC matchup. So you guys can send me comments, questions, thoughts, concerns, Spencer Scale agreement takes. Those are the best ones, of course. YouTube comments, Twitter. You guys know how to get in touch with me. At least I hope you do at this point. I try to make it about as easy as I possibly can. So Max sends this one in. Do you think Jaden Mayava will target the linebacker, since that's been our struggle, even though it's improved? 2, will this be a line of scrimmage and defensive game? I mean, I'm curious what you mean by line of scrimmage and defensive game. And let me start with the first part, and Oregon's linebacker. So Devin Jackson, not sure if he's going to be available this week. Oregon has been playing a lot, of course, by default, of Bryce Betcher and Jerry Mixon. Now, what I'm interested to see in this game is twofold with the Oregon linebacking unit. Number one, how much success are they able to have in defending the run? Because what they have really struggled with this year is knockback ability. they've been fine for the most part tackling. I know there have been a couple of moments, but for the most part, I trust Bryce Betcher and Jerry Mixon to make tackles in space. They're good at that. What they are not super strong at is having the necessary level of strength and physicality to really stand up running backs or quarterbacks that are running, and Jade Mayaba will run from time to time, to stuff them in the hole or hold them to a 1 or 2 yard gain instead of letting it become 3, 4, or 5 on a carry between the tackles. So I think in the run game, I'm sure Lincoln Riley would rather go at those guys than try to go on the perimeter with Oregon safeties who have tackled exceptionally well. Aaron Flowers and Dylan Thieneman are the best safety tandem Oregon has had since probably 2019, when you had, the roaming or the rotating combination of Brady Breeze and Javon Holland and Verone McKinley. So they have been really, really good. Now, in the pass game, USC doesn't use their tight ends a whole heck of a lot. Let me pull up the numbers real quick, but they go to their receivers a ton. Mekhi Lemon already has 1,000 yards this year. Jacoby Lane has 585. I mean, Mekhi Lemon averages 109 receiving yards a game, but Oregon has not had a 100-yard receiver on the year. But what that means is that they don't actually use their tight end a whole heck of a lot. I believe Lake McCree is their leading tight end. He's 6'4", 250-pound redshirt senior. He's got 24 catches on the year for 389 yards and 2 touchdowns. He averages about 39 receiving yards a game. So that's the area that typically a linebacker is going to match up with in coverage. Because there are 2 receivers that are so heavily used by the Trojans, there should not be a coverage instance in which Mekhi Lemon or Jacoby Lane are matched up with Bryce Betcher or Jerry Mixon. Now, that might depend on how much man versus zone Oregon plays. Ducks played a lot of man-to-man defense last week. Jeff Schwartz was pointing out that he felt like it was more man-to-man than they had played all season long. I think that's because they trusted their corners to go against the Minnesota wideouts. And yeah, they got beat a couple times, but they gave up 138 passing yards. It's not anything you can describe other than good. So in this particular game, I'm interested to see how that chess match plays out, because Mekhi Lemon is as good as any wide receiver in college football. He is what I hope DeCorian Moore becomes in his career, presuming he's able to come back, be fully healthy, and the guy that we saw all year. So I think that for the Oregon linebackers in this spot, I'm not generally that worried about them in coverage. I don't think they've been beat all that often. I'm more worried about them in the run game, because this is a USC team that can and will run the football. They go for about 190 on the ground as a team this year, and they've just had a lot more success than they have in years past. So, you mentioned Mayaba, the quarterback. He runs a little. His numbers this year I don't think are anything incredible running the football, but you see it from time to time. He's got 43 attempts for 124 total yards. That includes sack yardage, so you take that out, it's 208 yards. But again, it's not a ton. But situationally, it can be used kind of like Dante Moore. I don't think that the linebackers are a group that Mayaba is just going to be able to go at over and over, because I don't know in what scenario Oregon wants to have Mekhi Lemon or Jacoby Lane go. Jacoby Lane doesn't work from the slot. He's a perimeter, downfield, big body, contested catch guy. Lemon's a guy who works from the slot a heck of a lot. I think Jaden Kennedy could be really important in this game. Second one, will this be a line of scrimmage and defensive game? I mean, every game is a line of scrimmage game at some level. On the defense, I don't think this will be a low-scoring slugfest. Obviously, I think that favors Oregon more if it is, because I trust Oregon's defense to make a stop in a big moment than USC's, and the Ducks are at home in this one. But I think from a line of scrimmage standpoint, it's more about, not that disrupting Mayaba isn't important. It is. I'll talk about that more on tomorrow's show. But I think that for Oregon's offense, if they're able to come out and run the ball, I don't think USC's defense is good enough to just completely keep them in check. I really don't. So Don't know exactly what you're going for with the line of scrimmage and defensive game, but hope that answers your question. Days since Titans wants a Spencer scale of agreement on Marcus Mariota being the guest picker. Yeah, I haven't seen an announcement about this yet as I'm recording the show. I know that the Oregon quarterbacks are all, not coincidentally perhaps, on buys, or coincidentally on buys this week. I'd love to see Mariota. No shade at Sabrina whatsoever, who did a hilarious cameo hiding as a random fan, putting up shots in between media timeouts at the women's game over the weekend. It was really funny. But like Sabrina is of course great, but I don't think they'll go back to the well on her for a third time. I would love to see Mariota there, especially since he was there in 2012. Of course, that was his last year of college football when Kenyon Barner had the historic game. Will it be It's certainly possible. I mean, Dylan Brooks was in town for the men's basketball game earlier this week. They were playing the Blazers though on Tuesday, so maybe not. SSA, I think it's a 5. I think it's just as likely to happen as not. Nick wants an SSA on Mike Norvell coming to Oregon if he gets fired from Florida State. Well, Dan Lanning worked for him at Memphis. They know each other. I don't know what role he would be in. I don't think Mike Norvell, if Will Stein were to be a head coach somewhere next year, I don't know if Norvell wants to be an offensive coordinator. I think he'd be more likely to go back to the group of 5 ranks and make a pitch as, hey, I've been a head coach at this level before. You should hire me. I mean, frankly, the Memphis job could come open because Ryan Silverfield could absolutely get hired somewhere else. So I'm at a 3 on that one. Mike Norvell coming back, but keep sending me all your thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, anything with regards to the USC. I'll make sure to get to it on tomorrow's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.